Hey, we are live. Let me know if there are any troubles with the audio or anything else. But I did all my test runs and everything before, so it should be smooth sailing. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Welcome to yet another live stream of consciousness, where I intend to, when I feel, which should be on a month-to-month basis, sharing some of the thoughts and ideas I've had and cool and not so cool things I've seen in the past month. Technically, this is supposed to be the stream for March, but I brought it ahead of time, so I won't be doing anything in March unless it's the end of the world, or something big happens. I hope everyone is doing all right and not all left. If you're picking up the somberness in my tone, uh, give me a chance here to share why. I had a whole slate of stuff planned to talk about in the stream because, like I said, I think in the previous stream I want to do it more often because there's certain things that I'm not able to cover in my once a month videos that I would like to be able to cover live, and I also want to improve my ability to present without a script. And yet here I am, currently partially being guided by some notes that I've prepared. Um, Hopefully this experience with the stream is better. I've fixed my mic issue, and I've also decided, unlike the previous stream, I'm not going to try to chase down every message in the chat to try and read everything, because that's constantly scrolling through all the time. Uh, it's distracting, and it's not really conducive to sort of free-flowing conversation. So I won't always be looking at the chat. Um, But yeah, before we begin with the other things that I wanted to talk about, I just want to we're going to be addressing something very serious and very significant. The entire stream will not be that serious, but I'm not going to go the whole stream without acknowledging it. I'm acknowledging it one time, right out the gate. Giving a quick content warning for those who are sensitive to the topic of suicide and self-immolation. You can come back to the stream in a little while, maybe in a couple of minutes, and we'll probably be talking about other things. And maybe after the stream, I will timestamp the VOD so that people can skip around as they need to. So before we get into anything else, I just want to take a moment of silence to acknowledge and remember a former viewer of the channel. His name, Aaron Bushnell. And I also want to remember, of course, all of the victims of the genocide in Gaza and all those whose lives are being taken in other conflicts, whose stories have not been told. So I'm taking a 30 seconds of silence, starting now, in their memory. But I'm still completely in this process of learning, and there are certain things that I think it's important. I mean, in general, I think humility uh, is important, but especially when you do not feel equipped to adequately handle a topic, I think it's important to express that. There's no harm, there's no shame in saying, I don't know. Um, and so up to now, I don't really know what to say beyond what I've already said. His friends reached out to me over email, so I'm still gonna try to say some more. Um, and before I do, for those who missed it, I did address this before. I was told to check Twitter. Y'all would know I'm not on Twitter anymore. It's a hellhole. But I went on Twitter because somebody told me to go and check what Aaron had said on his Reddit. And so let me pull that up real quick on screen for you. I'm at a loss. So, Tiny Thunders said on Twitter, another Aaron Bushnell Reddit response captured March 2023 via the Wayback Machine. I've realized that, and these are Aaron's words, I've realized that a lot of the difference between me and my less radical friends is that they are less capable of imagining a better world than I am. I follow YouTubers like Andrewism that fill my head with concrete images of free, post-scarcity communities, and it makes me so much more prepared to reject things about the current world, because I've imagined how things could be, and that helps me see how extremely BS things are right now. What I'm trying to say is, it's so important to imagine a better world. Let your thoughts run wild with idealistic dreams of what the world should look like, and let the pain and anger at how it's not that way flow through you. Let it free your mind and fuel your rage against the machine. It's not too late for you or anyone. We can have the world of our dreams tomorrow, but we have to be willing to fight today. And I said, I'm at a loss for words. I actually learned about the Reddit response since the morning of that day, but I didn't go and formulate my response until the evening. I said, I'm at a loss for words. I still don't know what to say other than rest in peace and free Palestine till it's backwards. Beyond that, I can only echo his own words. We can have the world of our dreams tomorrow, but we have to be willing to fight today. I went on to say, with YouTube's stupid crop, by setting along the lines of continue to support aid for Palestinians and Congolese and Yemeni and Haitians and so on. Keep, I can't believe YouTube is cropping this. But you could go on Twitter and check what it is that I said, because I'm not gonna go back and try and log in. And plus, Twitter is like really hostile to like not being logged in on the site, so I can't exactly go and check my own page to see, because you have to log in these days to check tweets on Twitter. But yeah, that's what was said. So, because I'm always trying to learn and explore as much as possible, as the description, the tagline of my channel, since the very beginning, since the first video, I have some articles and a poem here, which we'll read together. First, the poem to provide the context. It's a poem that I first learned about from the Sean video, the video that Sean dropped a couple of days ago on Palestine. And since hearing it, I haven't been able to forget it. It's called O Rascal Children of Gaza by Khaled Chuma. And it goes, O rascal children of Gaza, you who constantly disturbed me with your screams under my window, you who filled every morning with rush and chaos, you who broke my vase and stole the lonely flower on my balcony, come back. And scream as you want and break all the vases, steal all the flowers, come back. Just come back. I haven't been the same since hearing that poem. I have not, you know. I am child care is something that I'm very passionate about. Children as a group, as an oppressed group, a group that I'm extremely passionate about, education, all those things. And so it really pains me to see that loss, to see that mass disabling event, to see that mass genocide of children in Gaza. Now, I have not done a video specific to the subject of Palestine. If you've been following my videos for long enough, you would see that I've been mentioning them I've mentioned them in several videos. I mentioned them in my national liberation video. I mentioned them in my indigenous, what it means to be indigenous video. But I didn't do a video on Palestine because, well, for one, I don't believe in creating, like, I don't see the need to create repetitive content. For those who have missed it, I mean, Noah Sampson has recently done a really good video on the subject. So has Sean, um, and others as well have put out very important videos on the subject. I mean, for now, I have little more to add, but to boost the works of those around me, like Sean and Noah Sampson and others, and continuously boost the link to the PCRF. Usually my streams have my Patreon link in the description, but I just want you all to go into the link in the description now, the Palestine Children's Relief Fund, because they still haven't reached their goal of $20 million in donations. They're very close. They're at 17 million something, I believe, last I checked. I have some articles here, like I said, that I wanted to read as well, that we'll go through. Just allow me to pull those up. First is from Crime Think, which is honestly one of my favorite websites. And it goes as such. There's certain notes I have to get through and stuff before I get into the comments, but let me proceed. On Sunday, February 25th, we received an email from a person who signed himself Aaron Bushnell. They put a note there because in the email, Aaron specified his pronouns as he, him. It read, "Today I am planning to engage in an extreme act of protest against the genocide of the Palestinian people. The below link should take you to a live stream and recorded footage of the event, which will be highly disturbing. I ask you to make sure that footage is preserved and reported on." We consulted the Twitch account. The username displayed was Lily Anna Kitty, and the user icon was a circle A, the universal signifier for anarchism, the movement against all forms of domination and oppression. In the video, Aaron begins by introducing himself. "My name is Aaron Bushnell. I am an active duty member of the US Air Force, and I will no longer be complicit in genocide. I am about to engage in an extreme act of protest, but compared to what people have been experiencing in Palestine at the hands of their colonizers, it's not extreme at all. This is what our ruling class has decided will be normal." The video shows Aaron continuing to film as he walks to the gate of the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C., puts down the phone, douses himself in a flammable liquid, and sets himself alight, shouting "Free Palestine" several times. After he collapses, police officers who had been watching the situation unfold run into the frame, one with a fire extinguisher, another with a gun. The officer continues pointing the gun at Aaron for over 30 seconds as Aaron lies on the ground burning. Afterwards, police announced they had called in their explosive ordnance disposal unit, but there were no explosives on site. We have since confirmed the identity of Aaron Bushnell. He served in the United States Air Force for almost 4 years. One of his loved ones described Aaron to us as a force of joy in our community. An online post described him as an amazingly gentle, kind, compassionate person who spends every minute and penny he has helping others. He is silly, makes anyone laugh, and wouldn't hurt a fly. He's a principled anarchist who lives out his values in everything he does. Aaron's friends tell us he has passed away as a consequence of his injuries. All afternoon, while other journalists were breaking the news, we discussed how we should speak about this. Some subjects are too complex to address in a hasty social media post. The scale of the tragedy that is taking place in Gaza is heart-rending. It exceeds anything we can understand from the vantage point of the United States. Over 30,000 Palestinians have been killed, including over 12,000 children. More than half of all inhabitable buildings in all of Gaza have been destroyed, along with the majority of hospitals. The vast majority of the population are living as refugees with little access to water, food, or shelter. The Israeli military is now planning a ground invasion on Rafah that will add untold numbers of casualties to this toll. It is not hyperbole to say that we are witnessing the deliberate commission of genocide. All available evidence indicates that the Israeli military will continue killing Palestinians by the thousand until they are forced to stop. And the longer this bloodshed goes on, the more people will die in the future, as other governments and groups imitate the precedent set by the Israeli government. The United States government bears equal responsibility for this tragedy, having armed and financed Israel and provided with impunity in the sphere of international relations. Within Israel, the authorities have effectively suppressed protest movements in solidarity with Gaza. If protests are going to exert leverage towards stopping the genocide, it is up to the people in the United States to figure out how to accomplish that. For my American viewers, please take this seriously. But what will it take? Thousands across the country have engaged in brave acts of protest without yet succeeding in putting a halt to Israel's assault. Aaron Bushnell was one of those who empathized with the Palestinian suffering and dying in Gaza, one of those haunted by the question of what our responsibilities are when we are confronted with such a tragedy. In this regard, he was exemplary. We honor his desire not to stand by passively in the face of atrocity. The death of a person in the United States should not be considered any more tragic or more newsworthy than the death of a single Palestinian. Still, there is more to say about his decision. Aaron was the second person to self-immolate at an Israeli diplomatic institution in the United States. Another demonstrated that the same thing at the Israeli consulate in Atlanta on December 1st, 2023. It is not easy for us to know how to speak about their deaths. Some journalists see themselves as engaged in the neutral activity of spreading information as an end in itself, as if the process of selecting what to spread and how to frame it could ever be neutral. Just interjecting here, in my studies, part of my studies involved journalism. There's no such thing as neutrality in journalism. So I'll proceed. For our part, when we speak, we presume that we are speaking to people of action, people like ourselves who are aware of their agency and are in the process of deciding what to do, people who may be wrestling with heartache and despair. Human beings influence each other both through rational argument and through the infectiousness of action. As Peter Kropotkin put it, courage, devotion, and the spirit of sacrifice are as contagious as cowardice, submission, and panic. Just as we have a responsibility not to show cowardice, we also have a responsibility not to promote sacrifice casually. We must not speak carelessly about taking risks, even risks that we have taken ourselves. It is one thing to expose oneself to risk. It is another thing to invite others to run risks, not knowing what the consequences might be for them. And here, we're not even speaking about a risk, but about the worst of all certainties. Let's not glamorize the decision to end one's life, nor celebrate anything with such permanent repercussions. Rather than exalting Aaron as a martyr and encouraging others to emulate him, we honor his memory, but we exhort you to take a different path. This is what our ruling class has decided will be normal. These words of Aaron's haunt us. And so we continue, and so we continue. I didn't intend to read the entire article, but you can check it out for yourself as well. They also recently posted Aaron's friend's memory of his life. Here we have in Democracy Now! It also covered the event. I'm not going to read it out in full, but there was an interview that took place speaking about how he shouted "Free Palestine" several times as he was consumed by the flames. I saw the video. There was a particular area I intended to highlight. Where is it? His friend Levi shared his message. I should have highlighted a specific quote, but you could also go and read the article for yourself. Right. They're speaking more so here about the history of self-immolation as a form of protest against war, having taken place during the US war on Vietnam, and now taking place twice against the US genocide, the Israeli and US genocide of the Palestinians in Gaza. It also took place in response to the treatment of Vietnamese Buddhists by the government, by Mohamed Bouazizi in Tunisia, a musician who called for an end to the US invasion of Iraq, and so on. It's an article you could also check out, as I said. The first article is on CrimethInc. I already closed the tab, but it's called "This is what our ruling class has decided will be normal," on Aaron Bushnell's action in solidarity with Gaza. And the second article is from Democracy Now! It was published on the 28th, so yesterday, and it's called "The Life and Death of Aaron Bushnell." Lastly, I feel it's my responsibility, as I emphasized in the article I read, to implore my audience not to follow in his footsteps. He was certainly one of us, um, somebody who believed the things that we believed in total freedom, in the freedom of all, and his efforts should not be forgotten or erased or dismissed. His efforts have, for me, have had an immense impact on the conversation, and it was an extreme action taken in response to extreme circumstances. But please remember that we need people here and now as well to do the work that needs doing. I will not condemn his act of protest or diminish it or attempt to assign blame for it to mental illness, as I've seen some people doing. But please know that there are other things that you, listening to me right now, can do to see change in this world. Amidst the heaviness of this week, this month, this year, and this era, for the rest of this stream, in his memory, we're going to try and muster the spirit of the work that helped inspire Iran's vision for a better world in the first place. There are a couple of things that I tend to talk about, but otherwise we'll be having a fairly free-flowing chat. But first, let me see what folks have been saying in the chat. I'm seeing I need to get some moderators in the chat. Let me see if anybody here is a regular. Anybody here I recognize? If you've been in the stream before, I may recognize your name. Oh, Floss Noir's here. Let me give Floss Noir moderator permissions. Fireball is here. Give for moderation privileges. Apparently there's some apologists in the chat. So I haven't seen it myself, but somebody was calling it out. Right. Rest in peace, Iran. I'm shocked about what happened. It's honestly told me my thoughts these last few days. Yeah, it's the first thing I thought about when I woke up this morning. Respect and honor him, but we can do as much as we can while we are on this earth. Rest in peace to Iran. I saw this text in the post the other day, and I believe it should be shared. They want to muffle Aaron Bushnell's protest by saying that giving your life for a cause is insane, but he was a soldier. Huey Newton put it beautifully: revolutionary suicide is not a death wish, but to live with hope and human dignity. Yes, insanity is a social construct. No, Elliot, I am not tolerant of intolerance. This is not the space for apologia of genocide at all. At all. Those are not perspectives to be platformed, promoted, engaged with. The case for genocide has been made very clear, and I see no need to engage with it further. Just to clarify, this channel is not meant to be all things to all people. In fact, I want to ask the question as to who you all think my target audience is, because I really don't believe that this channel was ever meant to be a free for all, a debate platform, a place for open bigots to just free roam and express their bigotry. Um, just because it's online doesn't mean that there should not be consequences to certain behavior. If you were in my physical space and you said something disgustingly racist, or if you expressed genocide apologia, you would no longer be in my space. Point blank. So to ask the question, who do you all think is my target audience? Because I really think it's important on the internet to understand who the intended consumer is for the things that you consume. You see this issue, for example, in certain fandom communities where a certain piece of media was intended for children, was written with children in mind, and then there are adults in those communities. And there's nothing wrong with adults being interested or enjoying children's media, but there are adults in those communities who very clearly cross certain boundaries and do not seem to recognize their place within those communities. Bronies automatically come to mind, and the way that bronies sort of poisoned the My Little Pony community for a lot of young girls, from what I've read. So I think that knowing the intended consumer of content can help with critique, can help with how you engage with it. It helps to remind yourself, I think, that not everything on the internet is written or created with you in mind, speaking directly to you. Not to go at anybody, but, keep that in mind. Justin Curry said, I think your target audience is people who want to learn. Exactly. Liberatory visionaries. Exactly. People who want to learn, people coming into anarchism. Precise. Okay, so people understand it. People who believe in bettering the world, people who have faith that the world can be better and offer safety and kindness. People who believe that we shouldn't need harmful systems to hinder us. People who want to learn, are passionate about, who are working towards a better, fairer, freer world. Well, I'm not, by the way, just to clarify, I'm not calling out all bronies, but there was an unfortunate trend with it among certain brony communities of apparently spreading very inappropriate material, being very irresponsible with that material, exposing children to that material, that sort of thing. To me, this channel has always been for those who need the right tools to fight for our futures, those who wish to cultivate a liberated and kind of tomorrow. People want to learn, take action against oppressive systems, oppressive structures that have been normalized. Community of people who want to make the world more free. Those who like to be challenged and analyzing the world around them. Yeah. Real talk. Real talk. That's the extent of it. Oh, don't get me started on it, because that was a pretty heavy thing that we had to address. And I mean, I know that I don't have super chats or anything like that because my channel is not monetized, but if I know that my colleagues and stuff, my fellow YouTubers, when they live stream, sometimes people want to send them money. You can't send me money this way because I don't have super chats, I don't have my channel monetized. If you want to send money, please follow the link that I have in the description. Yeah, just send money that way. sort of segue a bit into some of the other things that I intended to talk about. Um, Lately, I've been reading two books. The first is, well, three books, but I don't really want to count the third because I haven't really got past the first chapter yet. But the third one is Always Coming Home by Ursula K. Le Guin. It's very unconventional compared to, I think, her usual work. And I've kind of been focused on reading some of the other stuff, so I haven't gotten into it. But Always Coming Home by Ursula K. Le Guin, I'm really excited to get into it once I do begin. The next thing I've been reading is Sacred Economics by Charles Eisenstein, or Eisenstein. Um, I've reached, I think, chapter 6 or chapter 7, and actually, I think a little further along than that, but there is an excerpt from chapter 6 that I want to read for you all. But, I mean, so far, there are certain ideas and concepts he's talking about that I'm not too sure on. Certain other things he's expressed that I wholeheartedly agree with. So I want to read the book in full and digest the ideas before I put forward any particular affirmations or critiques. But there is an economic parable that he shares in the book that I just found really powerful. So, you know what? Let me just read it one time. Let me get the book. Swipe, 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 swipe. Let's see. Okay. It's called. I don't know who has the book. Let me check the chat one sec. Yes, so the parable is it was actually created by Bernard Liatel or Lightel. It's called the 11th Round from his book The Future of Money. At some point, potentially this year, I'll be covering money. Uh, the working title is Money Evil? Question mark. Um, it's intended to be part of potentially a three-part discussion on that subject because it's something that I'm still navigating my thoughts around, and I want to make sure that I'm fully informed on a couple different angles before I tackle it, as I try to do with all of the topics that I cover. So that's part of the reason I'm reading this book. Well, it's part of the reason is because I got it for Christmas. But yeah, so it goes like this. Once upon a time, in a small village in the outback, people used barter for all their transactions. I mean, if you all have seen my video in the barter economy, you all would know my thoughts on that, but it's a parable. We're not take it seriously. Let's keep going. On every market day, people walked around with chickens, eggs, hams, and breads, and engaged in prolonged negotiations among themselves to engage what they needed. At key periods of the year, like harvest, or whenever someone's barn needed big repairs after a storm, people recalled the tradition of helping each other out they had brought from the old country. They knew that if they had a problem someday, others would aid them in return. One market day, a stranger with shiny black shoes and an elegant white hat came by and observed the whole process with a sardonic smile. When he saw one farmer running around to corral 6 chickens, he wanted to exchange for a big ham. He cannot refrain from laughing. Well, let me get a rich people laugh. Ha 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 ha. Ha ha ha. Poor people, he said. So primitive. The farmer's wife overheard him and challenged the stranger. Do you think you could do a better job handling chickens? Chickens, no, responded the stranger, but there is a much better way to eliminate all that hassle. Oh, yes? How so? Asked the woman. See that tree there? The stranger replied, and I know I'm progressing through several accents at this point. But see that tree there? The stranger replied. Well, I will go wait there for one of you to bring me one large cowhide. Then have every family visit me. I'll explain the better way. And so it happened. He took the cowhide and cut perfect leather rounds in it and put an elaborate and graceful little stamp on each round. Then he gave to each family 10 rounds and explained that each represented the value of one chicken. Now you can trade and bargain with the rounds instead of the unwieldy chickens, he explained. It made sense. Everybody was impressed with the man with the shiny shoes and inspiring hat. Oh, by the way, he added after every family had received their 10 rounds, in a year's time I will come back and sit under that same tree. I want you to each bring me back 11 rounds. That 11th round is a token of appreciation for the technological improvement I just made possible in your lives. But where will we get the 11th round? But where will the 11th round come from? Asked the farmer with the 6 chickens. You'll see, ha ha ha, you'll see, said the man with a reassuring smile. Assuming that the population and its annual production remain exactly the same during that next year, what do you think had to happen? Remember, that 11th round was never created. Therefore, bottom line, one of each 11 families will have to lose all its rounds, even if everybody managed their affairs well, in order to provide the 11th round to 10 others. So when a storm threatened the crops of one of the families, people became less generous with their time to help bring it in before disaster struck. While it was much more convenient to exchange the rounds instead of the chickens on market days, the new game also had the unintended side effect of actively discouraging the spontaneous cooperation that was traditional in the village. Instead, the new money game was generating a systemic undertow of competition among all the participants. That's the parable. Not finished with the book yet. Charles Eisenstein, I believe he's going to go on later in the book to advocate for new forms of money and that sort of thing. I don't know what my thoughts are on that, so don't ask yet. I have to do more research still. But when I read that, that was pretty powerful. He also talks a lot about debt, which, if you've read Graeber's Debt, is plays a very significant role in the way the system is able to coerce us. But yeah, the book's name is Sacred Economics, Money, Gift, and Society in the Age of Transition, revised by Charles Eisenstein, or Eisenstein. I don't know how to pronounce it. Apparently it's available for free as well, but lately I've been trying to read more physical books. So yeah. That's one of the many things that I intended to share today. The next thing that I wanted to share was from the other book that I've been reading a lot of. I've been eating this one up. I've been flying through the pages. It's fairly short. It's called Anarchy, a Graphic Guide by Clifford Harper. And I was particularly inspired by pages 98 to 101. So let me find that real quick. This is basically what my streams are, by the way. It's a sort of a live stream of consciousness. I bottle up all the different things that I wanted to talk about on chat, on stream, and now I'm pouring it all out. Right. So, in Anarchy, a Graphic Guide by Clifford Harper, at one point he's talking about the Francisco Ferrer and the free schools. And it was very topical that I reached this because I'm actually going to be doing a video on deschooling society and a sort of a revamp of the education system video that I literally started this channel with. I actually received a comment on that video a while ago, and I was like, wow, people are still watching it, like my human nature video. The human nature video is another video that it was one of the first I did. I ended up taking the original one down and I have the new one up still. But yeah, I want to revamp the education video as well because I have a lot more. Now that I've learned a lot more, I have a lot more to add to it to really, beef it up. So this passage was really, really impactful. Let me actually, so you all have like more to look at than just the chat scrolling by and my face hopping all over the place. Let me pull it up on the thingy. And this book, by the way, is available on libcom, actually. So you can read it right there on your computer, which is what I've been doing. But I do want to get a physical copy, though, because it's been a fun read, and I really like the art. Also, for those, with attention span, issues. The art in this book really tends to break up the text really well, so you're able to see, like it's some impactful stuff. It sort of breaks up the text, it creates more dynamism. Clifford Harper, I think, did a really good job. But right, in this, so he says, among those facing the military court was a teacher, Francisco Ferrer. Although he had not been near Barcelona at any time during the Rising, he was charged with being head of the insurrection. Ferrer had discovered anarchism in the clubs and bars of Paris, where he had been by the way, the reason I said Paris so strangely was because I had to resist the urge to do the pretentious thing and pronounce it in French. Um, Paris, Uh, but I already get in trouble enough as it is for imitating European accents. So let me not do that. The sound you're hearing is me shaking my protein shake. I just realized I've left it here to get all stale. So I need to drink it real quick. Right. Blah, blah, blah. Paris, where he had been exiled after the 1885 Republican uprising. It was there that he had met anarchist Paul Robin, head of the Sempuis School and the inspiration for the League for Libertarian Education. Ferrer, then 24 years old, dreamed of creating a similar school in Spain. Having been left £1,000,000 by benefactor, Ferrer opened his modern school in Barcelona on September 8th, 1901. Until that time, Spanish schooling was entirely controlled by the church. Only one town in 3 had a school, and all schools were supervised by priests, with teachers sworn to uphold Catholic dogma. Ferrer intended his modern school to challenge all that. Quote, I want to form a school of emancipation concerned with learning from the mind whatever divides people, the false concepts of property, country, and family, so as to attain the liberty and well-being which all desire. I will teach only one simple truth. I will teach only simple truth. I will not ram dogma into their heads. I will not conceal one iota of fact. I will teach not what to think, but how to think. Ferrer was opposed to both church and state schooling. Rulers have always taken care to control the education of the people. They know their power is based almost entirely on the school, and they insist on retaining their monopoly. The school is an instrument of domination in the hands of the ruling class. End quote. The modern school had no rewards or punishments, exams or marks, the everyday tortures of conventional schooling. And because practical knowledge is more useful than theory, lessons were often held in factories, museums, or the countryside. The school was also used by the parents, and Ferrer planned a popular university. Quote, higher education for the privileged few should be for the general public, as every human has a right to know, and science, which is produced by observers and workers of all countries and ages, ought not be restricted to class. The modern school was also a propaganda center, a training ground for revolutionary activity. Quote, we don't hesitate to say we want people who will continue to develop, people constantly capable of destroying and renewing their surroundings and themselves, whose intellectual independence in their supreme power, which they will yield to none, always disposed for better things, eager for the triumph of new ideas, anxious to crowd many lives into the life they have. It must be the aim of the school to show the children that there will be tyranny as long as one person depends on another. That last line, I don't know what he meant by that though. I think in mutual interdependency is a core principle of anarchist politics. I could be reading that in a different way, maybe it was a mistranslation or whatever, but I'm not exactly sure what he means by that. Maybe if I find the book this quote was in, I could see this around in context. But yeah, carrying on. Soon the school had 125 pupils and the examples spread. By 1905, there were 50 similar schools in Spain. On Good Friday of that year, Ferrer led 1,700 children in a demonstration for free education. Within weeks, the government acted and forcibly closed all the schools. Earlier that year, anarchists had twice thrown bombs at Spain's King Alfonso. One of them, Mateo Moral, worked at the modern school's printing press and was a close friend of Ferrer. For this, Ferrer was jailed for a year. On his release, he traveled throughout Europe spreading the free school message. After returning to Spain, Ferrer was again arrested following the tragic week of 1909 and was executed by firing squad. But his death did nothing to diminish the force of his ideas. Modern schools were founded in Britain, France, Belgium, Holland, Italy, Germany, Switzerland, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, China, Japan, and on the greater scale in the USA. And then, he goes on to talk about the stealth in the modern school and all those different things. Um, but this isn't this isn't going to be an entirely audiobook stream. Let me chat with the comments for a little bit as well. Let's see what's going on. That book, by the way, is called Anarchy: A Graphic Guide by Clifford Harper. No, my accent is not Welsh. um, Fanon trained under a Spanish anarchist psychiatrist Toscales. Oh, I have to look that up. Let me check that. Let me verify that info. Let me see. Francois Toscal. Fought on the Republican side for the Workers' Party of Marxist Unification. Okay. Credited as one of the creators of institutional psychotherapy. Experience in military occupations throughout his lifetime. Right, so Franz Fanon was one of his students. Okay. I don't see anything here of him being an anarchist, but he did fight on the Republican side during the Spanish Civil War. Yeah, if he was with the Workers' Party of Marxist Unification, wouldn't that make him more of a Marxist? I'll have to do some research on this on my own. Yeah. Let me see what's on in the chat. Libraries, meetings, promotions. I assume you've read C.L.R. James' work. The only work of C.L.R. James's that I've read is The Black Jacobins. Um, and I think that reading that book is one of the main reasons I think I've become very, very passionate about, I think, engaging with our history. Um, I have some unorganized thoughts around this topic. Um, but I know that I'm really I get a bit frustrated, I think, sometimes with the superficial engagement with Black history that takes place not just in, you know, Black History Month, but in general. I think oftentimes we treat these events and these moments and these movements and these people as icons and sources of inspiration, yes. But I think that does both those moments, people, movements, a disservice, and it does ourselves a disservice. Um, I really want to see more critical engagement with the history. It's wonderful to hear and to be inspired by the Haitian Revolution, the first successful slave revolt. Of course, the parameters of success being based on the idea of forming a state of one's own, but that tension, that conversation, this idea that that definition of success is something that you can interrogate, considering like maroon history and all these different things as well. But I mean, even then, those are the kind of conversations I would rather be having. I would love to see more things, more discourse, or more. Actually, I don't really like discourse on the internet, but at least in person, I do like to have really meaningful conversations about, yes, the Haitian Revolution gained its independence, but you know the social structures of that revolution in part contributed. And if you read the Black Jacobins, you would see couldn't engage with it. But outside of that, I think it's very important. And until I want to organize these thoughts fully, I really think it's important to properly, whether we're talking about the Haitian Revolution, the Black Panther Party, whatever, um, really, we need to stop doing ourselves a disservice and actually dig into those histories and learn the lessons. It's not enough to just learn about them. We have to learn the lessons so we can learn from them. You dig? That's my thoughts for now. Um, I need to turn the light because I just realized I didn't put on the light and now the room is fully dark. And yeah, Fanon wasn't an anarchist. The POU, yeah, we're Trotskyists, yeah. Um, Fireball says I need to read Beyond the Boundary by C.L.R. James. Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about that book. Um, haven't read it yet myself because it's about crickets, but I know Fireball is a big fan of cricket. The surest way to fail to learn the lesson of a movement is to lionize it, to put it on a pedestal. Absolutely, absolutely. That's what I'm trying to get at here. Yeah, Haiti yet to pay France for their loss of property and it's yet to repay Haiti for this. Yep. Is it Michelita or Michelita or Michelita? But Andrew, I would assume you have read writings from Paulo Friere. Yes. A little while ago, about like 2 years ago, I read Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Um, I believe he has a follow-up book. Let me check. Stop trying to tell me to sign in Google. I'm not going to sign in. Pedagogy of the Oppressed. It's two S's, right? Yeah. I believe he has a second book, but I haven't read it. Pedagogy of Freedom, Pedagogy of Hope, etc., etc. Just give me a second. I have to answer the door. I'll be back. Actually, before I do, nah, I'll be back. Yeah, right. So I'm back. Um, yeah, literally everything I've learned about Trotskyism is deeply concerning. I think it's better than the idea of socialism in one country. But I mean, at the end of the day, I'm an anarchist, so that whole milieu is I have some fundamental disagreements with anyway. Uh, Emerald Jack, you can check out the link to anarchy.works if you go and type in on your URL anarchy.works. For both the book Anarchy Works by Peter Gallows and also the FAQ, an anarchist FAQ, both very well done, comprehensive texts um, that should answer that question because there is no anarchist state. We wouldn't call it a state. Um, and as for how it looks like, that is something that anarchists discuss. Anarchists even discuss whether full anarchy can even be achieved. But recently I read on Rattle Wiki, I saw a really good, I think, description. No, it's not this. Rattle Wiki. A really, really fantastic description of, bruh, where is it? I have to get the link elsewhere then. Yeah, a really good description of anarchy. It goes that anarchy is the opposition to authority, the rejection of hierarchy, and the unending strive for autonomy and self-determination. Anarchy is the negation of all the classes, institutions, and dogmas built to rule people. Anarchy is above all a practice, not a theory. It is about actively working to end authoritarian relationships wherever they exist and build non-authoritarian alternatives. It is not about trying to prescribe a way of life for an imagined place and time and imagined people. It is for real people and dealing with real problems. Anarchy is a living and breathing practice we incorporate into our everyday lives, a personal stance against authority that informs all our decisions and thus shapes the trajectory of our existence. There is no end goal to anarchy. It is an ongoing fight against hierarchical systems and the authority figures that construct them. Anarchy is a burning desire for freedom from tyranny. Anarchy is countless generations of disparate people with the drive to be freer than they are under the systems that forcibly govern them. Here are some of these people, and then, goes in. So, I mean, if you're asking about fundamentals, anarchy, bruh, I didn't type it in properly. It's not anarchy.work, it's anarchy.works. But yet offers both this text and the FAQ. And the FAQ, I mean, is like seriously comprehensive. Of course, to be clear, the anarchist FAQ perspective, and there are more streams to anarchism than just anarchist communism. Um, and it's a very big document, so it'll take a while to load. Anarchy Works is a bit shorter, but those should answer some of the fundamental questions people tend to have about the subject. Okay. Um, yeah, what else was I going to talk about? What else? What else? Right. Something I stumbled upon, again, keeping with this theme of live stream of consciousness, something I stumbled upon recently was actually on Reddit. So up until recently, when Reddit redesigned their website again, I spent some time perusing the discourse in certain communities on the site. We give Reddit a lot of flack, justifiably so, and there is a lot of bad there, don't get me wrong, as with any social media, but I think you can find some gems in the comments as well, especially since Reddit does not have the heavily restrictive character limits found on other sites. Um, so yeah, I mean, take everything on Reddit with a grain of salt, of course, but you do find some gems. And so in this case, I literally copied the comment to share with you all because I found it so well put. A user named Sajak Alcam put this thoughts I've been having really well on a thread on r/free from work. And by the way, that sub was created after the drama and upheaval of r/anti-work. Um, this was meant to be a more radical alternative to that sub. But the comment says, there's this misconception you'll find permeating throughout institutions of power that there exists a quote, real world. That's not how the real world works. You'll never last in the real world. I've heard it all, you've heard it all. We know this platitude and its endless echoes of consumerist capitalism. Yet if you walk to the edge of the cliffs overlooking the ocean, you will find no seals trading banknotes, no otters investing in firms, no waves wondering whether or not they've invested enough to retire. The real world continues as it has for millennia, unbothered by the incomprehensibly obtuse worries of humanity. It's a shame so few seem to see it. I've always bemoaned the real world argument because it shows a willing ignorance of the fact we molded this real world and can do so again. There's nothing natural about economics. We decide how the world works. We can choose to change the real world to better society, and we have throughout history. Centuries ago, if you said you wanted a representational form of government where everyone had a say, you'd be told that isn't how the real world works. But then we rewrote the real world to make democracy the quote-unquote standard. End quote. Now, I mean, this actually has a quote similar to this, but much shorter. Um, it goes something about the divine right of kings. Right. We live in capitalism. Quote, we live in capitalism. Its power seems inescapable. So did the divine right of kings. Any human power can be resisted and changed by human beings. So, keeping in that theme, really. Um, let that comment and that quote root in your head and carry it with you for a bit. really wrestle with its implications. What do I think about people, how some people don't like the label anarchy? I think it's very important. Hold on, somebody's at the door again. Did my Wi-Fi drop? I think my Wi-Fi dropped just now. Damn. Okay, stabilize. We good. We good. So it's the out. What about people who don't like the label anarchy? I don't really like to shy away from. I used to be one to try and cloak the concept of anarchy, to shy away from it, to say, oh well, I just believe in freedom, or I think there goes. My frames are dropping. I'm seeing it on OBS. I'm literally step dropping in and out. Um, if y'all could hear me, just let me know once it's stabilized. But yes, in the process of answering the question. So I mean, I used to shy away from anarchy. I used to say, I don't know if I want to say that. I mean, I would always thought of myself as an anarchist, but I didn't want to scare people off, you know? Um, but it's not enough to just be like, oh, I'm in freedom or I'm against forms of authority. I especially, I especially don't like when people pull the Noam Chomsky definition of, oh, anarchism is just opposition to unjust hierarchies. That is not what anarchism is. Historically, it has never been about opposition to unjust hierarchies. It's been a opposition to hierarchy, as in hierarchical power structures, as in the principle of command, that power relation between order givers and order takers. Um, if you say, "Oh, I'm against unjust hierarchies," I mean, anybody could say that. Anybody could say, "Oh, I'm against unjust hierarchies," but consider the state a just hierarchy, or consider the relationship between the boss and the workers a just hierarchy. You know. So I'm against that definition, but that's a brief aside. Why I call myself an anarchist is because it forces somebody to actually grapple with the implications of that position. I mean, subjective experience and everything, but in my experience, when I've expressed to somebody that I consider myself an anarchist, they tend to be curious. They tend to ask, what does that mean? They tend to ask, why do you consider yourself that way? What does that mean? I didn't know that was a political philosophy. Um, what does it mean to be against all forms of hierarchical power? How can we take on those hierarchies? Um, I think it's important to reclaim anarchy from authorities because they will continue to use it to smear, to besmirch the names of people who identify as anarchists, to smear and besmirch the idea that we can live without them. So I will continue to call myself an anarchist. I really do encourage people to normalize. We talk about normalize this, normalize that. Normalize anarchy. The stigma, yeah, exactly, come together counseling. The word anarchism is so important precisely because there is a stigma against it. It means a certain politics, a certain form of organization, a certain history. The state wants a stigma there. Agreed. And I don't, I know a lot of people, right, philosophy now, like you're saying, I feel a lot of people would agree with anarchist tenets if you didn't tell them it was anarchy. I mean, yes and no. I mean, on one hand, a lot of anarchist ideas are very, accommodating, but some anarchist ideas are genuinely challenging. And I would rather people challenge themselves than, convince them that they are an anarchist without necessarily holding to what anarchism means. Um, there are like what I'm trying to say is because of the pervasiveness of hierarchy, there is this sense that within people that it is inevitable in some way. And part of anarchy is just challenging that very notion. So you have to make sure when you're communicating that concept that you're really getting through to them that all that it entails. Otherwise, you end up with what is the case right now, unfortunately. A lot of people who say that they are anarchists, but they don't actually grapple with the implications of it. They don't actually understand what anarchism means. They don't understand the history. They don't understand the concepts. And that is something like I'm really like sort of re-evaluating as part of my efforts. Just a little hint for the people who tune in. I'm actually currently working on. So what have I hinted so far? A deschooling video. I spoke about is money evil video. So I'm also gonna spoil. I'm also working on a video on organizing anarchy. It's gonna be a sort of a follow up to my consensus video, which is actually quite topical, I think, right now because Aaron Bushnell actually did. I don't know if he referenced the video specifically, but I saw in one of his posts him talking about consensus. Um, and so, I mean, I've been digging into some of the earlier texts. I've been reading a lot of Sean Wilbur lately. And so I have more to say on the topic of organized anarchy. I understand certain concepts now that I didn't understand then. So I'm almost going to be sort of critiquing myself a bit in the organized anarchy video as a follow-up to that consensus video because even then I don't think I was fully grappling with just how radical anarchism is in terms of how it asserts what it means by free association. It's not just a buzzword. It has actual implications, some interesting implications that I think deserve further exploration. Another aspect as well that deserves further exploration, which I will be doing in the organized anarchy video, is sort of separating the concept of hierarchy from concepts that get associated with hierarchy. So, because of the pervasiveness of hierarchy, what I like to call hierarchical realism, Anarch as well uses that term. Because of the pervasiveness of hierarchy, it's very easy to get accustomed to associating things that are not hierarchy with hierarchy. Saying, oh well, or things that shouldn't be hierarchy, just assigning hierarchy to them. Um, But I think it's very important to sort of separate hierarchy from expertise, to separate hierarchy from force, to separate hierarchy from violence, from coercion, from coordination. All of those things do end up becoming connected with hierarchy in a hierarchical system. Um, but they are distinct and should all be examined in their own terms. Um, so those thoughts are still a little bit messy, but there's some that I'll be exploring in the video. But right, I was addressing philosophy. What I was saying was that I really think that it's important that people challenge themselves when they're coming into anarchy. Um, I know that for example, and this is another thing I'm gonna be tackling in the video, this idea of democracy. I know it's something that is very contentious among anarchists, and my perspective on it has shifted a bit, but that's not a conversation I really want to get into right now. But while it's important to have accessible entry points for people, I think it's important that we, are able to nudge people beyond those entry points. Because I think right now there are some people that are stuck at those entry points. Let me take a swig of water because I've been talking non-stop. What do I think about rewilding? I love I love how you call these people mossy earth to others. Um like whew, fantastic stuff. I eat that up. Mm-mm-mm, you know? And you see those permaculture like restoration projects where you see like a desert or like a really sparse landscape be transformed like mm, delicious. Delicious. Let me keep reading. Have I read The Fire Next Door by James Baldwin? I haven't. I have not. The website, I'll drop it in the chat, but it's Anarchy Works. Um, I don't know how caught up or not caught up I am to the chat, but like I said, I wasn't really studying that today because that could be a little bit distracting. I'll drop it in the chat though. Anarchy Works. Anarchy.works. Lamar Haynes, yeah. You have to look for, we have to really, like I've been saying, I really want to connect anarchist, anarchists in the Caribbean, find some ways to get us together and, discuss our situation because I am writing a book that is hopefully going to facilitate conversations about anarchism in the Caribbean. That's been my project for the past 2 years, and I consider it half of my life's work. Um, let me drink my protein. Wait, after Camus, I have not read Camus. What flavor of anarchist am I? I used to call myself an anarchist communist, and then I sort of flirted with like post civilization stuff. Uh, but right now, if I were to label myself, I would say I'm an anarchist without adjectives. Um, I've been inspired a lot by Sean P. Wilbur and his work on libertarian labyrinth. And he's a mutualist. He considers himself a neo-Proudhonist, but I've been reading a lot of that work recently. And so I kind of I'm without adjectives right now. I think that's really the kind of the point of Andrewism as a term, as a project, as a lifelong journey of learning. Um, Andrewism just encapsulates like everything, all the different things I'm trying to learn about and explore. And as it shifts and shakes and whatever, it's not like so rigid that it has to be attached to a particular label. Anarchism, I think, is always going to be guided by anarchism, but I don't think any specific school do I need to like limit myself to. Oh, Tani is in the chat. I'm so sorry for your loss, Tani, and I'm glad my work was able to be an inspiration. Bonolo asks, "Do you wear clothes with the anarchy symbol?" I don't. I'm actually not tapped into anarchism as a subculture at all because I didn't stumble upon anarchism through like urban scene, like a local milieu or things like that. I came upon anarchism first through my religious deconstruction. As I was trying to figure out Christianity for myself, I ended up stumbling upon a Christian anarchist, and that was like my first exposure to it. And then from there, I sort of moved on. I mean, I'm not a Christian anymore, but yeah, it was not something that I came upon through punk or through some of the subcultures that are associated with anarchism. In fact, I think I learned about Solarpunk before I learned about anarchism. I mean, now anarchism informs my Solarpunk rather than vice versa. Solarpunk's like the aesthetic dressing of my anarchism. Oh, and on that topic, actually, I understand there are people who are towards Solarpunk. They're not really a big fan or whatever. But I hope people understand that I have to engage with Solarpunk a bit differently. Like since I made my first video on Solarpunk, my thoughts and some of the ideas have shifted. As I've learned more about solar panels, for example, as I've learned more about uh rare earth minerals and the processes entailed, those sort of things, and the way that the art is often very high modernist, which is very contrary to the principles it aims to espouse. Um, having conversation about, for example, the Chobani ad, which I was initially inspired by, but now have some criticisms of. My ideas on Solarpunk are consistently shifting, but the reason I hold on to it, despite some of the valid criticisms I see people making, is because I feel that my platform has the potential to shape how we talk about Solarpunk. You know, if I was just some guy, I mean, I am still some guy, but I'm some guy with an amplified voice. If I was just some guy, then I would say, oh well, Solarpunk kind of seems like it's just skyscrapers with trees on it, so let me dismiss it. But I think because part of my come up was as a result of Solarpunk, I feel like I have responsibility to pull people who were inspired by it as I was to go further than it and to push it further, to take it to places that currently it's not at. Which is also why I started doing these Solarpunk art collaborations. The first one in 2021, the second one had a theme. In 2023 was called Bio. What did I call it again? Oh, I forget it. What was it called? Bioregions. Yeah. And so the next topic for Solarpunk, the next Solarpunk one, the one for this year, which I haven't officially announced yet. Um, but that one, one of the ideas I'm flirting with for the title of that one, of the theme of that one, may be Solarpunk 2024, New Dreams of Labor, because I was very intrigued by the I don't dream of labor movement, or the I don't dream of labor sort of discussion that was taking place, I think, earlier last year or the year before. And there was some good discourse came out of it in that corner of the internet, that commentary corner, and video essay corner. I never said anything about it other than my video on the meaning of anti-work, but in that video, I do draw a distinction between work as we understand it now and labor, and sort of that erasure, the labor leisure dichotomy. And so I'm sort of flirting with the idea of having new dreams of labor be the theme, so that we can sort of explore in the artwork what labor can look like. Sort of get the anarchists, sorry, not the anarchists, well, anarchists, yes, but the artists' brains tune in with what that can look like, reimagine in a new context. And I would offer some guidelines and stuff. When I announce it fully, I'll give all the details, but that's what I'm thinking about for that subject. Uh, Having a positive attitude towards technology is so tough these days. Yeah, it is. It really is. Which actually brings me to segue quite well with something that um, I meant to talk about, and that is, well, before I do, have you all heard of The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas by Ursula K. Le Guin? So, for one, it was covered in Sean's video on Palestine. Um, and people have been talking about it for a while because it came out years ago. But it's a short story that explores a city called Omelas. In Omelas, the summer solstice is celebrated with a glorious festival and da 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 da. Let me just read from the Wikipedia page so y'all can see. The ones who walk away from Omelas. Let me pull that up real quick. Yeah, so the essence of it is, it's describing a summer festival in the utopian city of Omelas, whose prosperity depends on the perpetual misery of a single child. Sean sort of describes it as a situation where there's some kind of magical pact. The specifics of it are never fully clarified in the book, and you're sort of meant to imagine Omelas as whatever your version of utopia is. Um, and so what we have here, in this story, we have a situation where the prosperity and joy of the people in Omelas is dependent on the suffering of a child. And some respond to the story by saying, oh, well, just free the child. But the point is being missed. It's an allegory, and it demands that we question how even utopia, how our imaginations of utopia can still be built on the suffering of others. I think it's especially important for those in my audience who are in the global north to recognize. For the social democrats who might valorize the Scandinavian countries, for instance. Keep Omelas in mind, right? Keep Omelas in your head, right? I'm still answering the question the person asked me, or rather the statement they made that I'm jumping on. And now I want to put another seed in your head: degrowth or post growth, whatever you prefer to call it. Keep that concept in mind for those who watched my video on the subject, and we'll discuss that after I read a post that I found on Tumblr a little while ago. This is, I wonder if I could find it on, and like just read it from Tumblr itself. Let me try and pull it up first. Okay. Okay, let's go. Um, Found it. Found it. Let me make sure it's visually appropriate. Boom, there we go. Let me pull it up on stream. I mean, I could raise the audio. Nobody really complained about it, but I can't raise the audio. Let me do that real quick. Raise it up to 125%. Now I'm bouncing because I pressed the wrong thing. But yeah, it should be a little bit louder now. Let me keep going. Right, so, quote. Ever so often, I'm struck by the memory of one of my college professors getting very angry with our class, Art History of Pompeii 250, because when she excitedly detailed the ingenious Roman invention of heated floors in bathhouses via hearths and small crawl spaces, we asked who was tending the fires. She said, quote, oh, slaves, I suppose, but that isn't the point. And we said that it actually very much was the point. She had just told us that in Roman society there were dozens of people, maybe hundreds, who spent every day of their enslaved lives crawling in cramped, hot, smoky tunnels to light fires to warm pools of water, which they were not allowed to swim in. How could that not be the point? She wanted us to focus on the art, on the innovation of heated plumbing, on the tiles and the decorations of the bathhouses, and all we wanted to do was learn more about the people under the floors. And she didn't know anything more about that. In fact, she said she thought we were focusing too much on superfluous details. It feels almost hokey to put too fine a point on the idea I'm getting at here, but I will anyway. There are a lot of people who are still under the floors. All these beautiful, convenient, brilliant innovations of modern society, think fast fashion, ChatGPT, Uber, DoorDash, are still powered by people, my voice is starting to go, are still powered by people working in inhumane, untenable conditions. The people who run these systems want you to focus on the good. Who doesn't love warm water? But if anything is going to improve or change in our lifetimes, you need to examine these things with an attentive, critical, and empathetic eye. And for F's sake, stop ordering from Amazon. Boom. So, Omelas, degrowth, that. Right? For those who don't know, degrowth, well, you can watch my video on the subject, but degrowth is, it's a quote from the website, an idea that critiques the global capitalist system which pursues growth at all costs, causing human exploitation and environmental destruction. The degrowth movement of activists and researchers advocates for societies that prioritize social and ecological well-being instead of corporate profits, overproduction, and excess consumption. This requires radical redistribution, reduction in the material size of the global economy, and a shift in common values towards care, solidarity, and autonomy. Degrowth means transforming societies to ensure environmental justice and a good life for all within planetary boundaries. And then they have the essentials of degrowth there. You can watch my video as well for a broader view. And so, as that person reminded me of how difficult it is to feel hopeful about technology, it made me feel for the sort of frustrations I have with the degrowth conversation. You know, I feel like people are just plugging their ears and their eyes for what's to come. You know, they've gotten so enamored with one way of life that they either don't want to consider social environmental consequences, or don't want to consider its longevity, or don't want to consider solutions that will change, but hopefully still maintain a good quality of life and also elevate the life quality of others. And it's frustrating, you know. I mean, I don't have the answers to everything yet. I never will. I don't have, and really, nor does anyone have an intricate and detailed map of every world supply chain, for instance. But as an anarchist, I trust that people will build the infrastructure to help themselves, the institutions to help themselves, the networks to help each other. You know, we're not starting from scratch. Social revolution is not a revolution. We burn everything down and start over. You know, part of it involves evolving what's there and building what isn't. But that aside, because it's so easy to get into the weeds of that conversation, I just need people to start thinking about these questions. And a lot of people would rather just slander you as anti-tech or neo-Luddite or primitivist or call you a hypocrite for even suggesting that, you know, maybe same-day delivery is unsustainable. Maybe personal cars are not sustainable. Maybe this way of life, the way that we've built this thing, could have never lasted for very long. I don't say that to say that we could never have large-scale, complex, or advanced systems in societies. I mean, I'm not so parochial that I don't want to live beyond a village. I would like to travel the world. I would like to see what there is to see. I would like to connect with others and be part of things that are bigger than myself and my immediate community. But at the same time, as an anarchist, and I believe that this is not necessarily the case, but let's just say hypothetically it was the case. If there was no alternative to something other than forcing people to do it through economic or violent coercion, slavery, the thing this machine runs on, I would be okay with not having it. Whoa, 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 whoa. Radical concept, I know. See, I like technology. My favorite video game, by the way, is not even thetical to my principles. It's antithetical to my principles. My favorite video game is Crusader Kings 3, a game that is literally about like rulers and their dynasties, but it's all in good fun. It's fictional. In the real world, abolish monarchy and all other hierarchies. But I'm getting off track. I love technology, I love games, I love the internet. But if we tried our best, which by the way we haven't done so far under capitalism, but if we tried and we really couldn't find a way to sustain that technology without slavery, without environmental devastation on a severe scale, I would rather not have it. My comfort should not be at the cost of another's freedom. My comfort should not be at the cost of life on Earth. So if I'm not willing to go down into a cobalt mine and there's no other way but to force somebody down a cobalt mine by gunpoint, then I guess we just wouldn't have cobalt. Now again, I don't think that'll be the case. I mean, from my extremely limited understanding but extremely vast imagination, I could see things like landfill mining and automated mining maybe taking off. And you know what? If people are willing to take on the onerous task of going into the pits themselves, I think they should be rewarded. I mean, not monetarily per se. Not to dismiss money entirely, because I haven't read enough of the literature to condemn that option entirely. But you know, however we decide to reward that person for that sort of sacrifice. You know, they'd be a hero to me. And I really do believe that there will be people, there might be people who are willing to self-sacrifice in small ways for the good of everybody else. And you know, um, but the important part is that they're choosing to do so. They're not being forced to do so at gunpoint. They're not being commanded to do so. They're not placed into a position of such deprivation that they have no real choice. You know, in an anarchist society, the capacity to do something is proportionate to the free will of people to do them. And because everybody has the will, at least to meet their basic needs, you know, food, shelter, infrastructure, medical care, all these things, and because we rely on mutual interdependency to meet those needs, I think it's possible that we can solve a lot of these issues without falling back on the crutch of hierarchy. But, you know, let me save that talk for my organizing anarchy video. That's still gonna take a really long time to work out and navigate, but I think it'll be worth it. Let me see what y'all are saying. Yeah, Valkyries. Yeah, I know the Luddites were awesome. I did a whole podcast episode on them, and I also spoke about them in my video on technology. They are awesome. They weren't anti-tech. They were early wildcat strikers, as you're saying, destroyed machines that were taking their jobs and forcing them out of work. Yeah. As my yeah, take care, floss and wall. I think that's leftism leave my body the second I boot up Minecraft. That's funny. Spyco asks, what do you say to anarchy is more popular than imperial core because government is oppressive, but in global south corporations have more power and government is weak against them, so communism is more popular? Well, for one, I don't. Well, a couple of things. One, I don't argue on the basis of popularity. Um, if you're talking about like if you're trying to imply which is more valid for which circumstance, um, I don't go based off of popularity. Second thing, I don't like the distinction between anarchy and communism isn't an implication of what that communism means, but you know, that particular form of communism does not have that is, you know, Marxism, Leninism does not have a monopoly on communism. So it's sort of a false dichotomy there because anarchism and communism are very much compatible. Anarchist communism is one of the most popular currents in the anarchist milieu. And also, I do question the popularity of one over the other. Like, I really haven't seen, I haven't seen any data for one to indicate that one is more popular than the other. It's very often movements, anarchist adjacent and anarchist movements, and people are very often erased from these sort of conversations when they're not, when they're coming from the global south. So I don't really see how this conversations, how the conversation could be had when we don't know, you know, which is more valid. And then also the justification being that one is because the government is more oppressive and in global south corporations are more powerful. I mean, that gets into something I was talking about in my last stream, which is that this, you know, divide, this classification is really flawed. The global south category is really flawed in my opinion. Um, yeah, there are definitely countries in the quote unquote global south where corporations have a run on the place, you know, but then there are also situations where the government is definitely more powerful. And so I really don't see that as a good metric to go based off of. Andrew, how can I raise an anarchist dog? I have no idea. If lady who first self-immolated in Atlanta wants to be known, she reportedly lived, I hope you learn her name. Yeah. The fact that all the information on her was scrubbed is very sad. Do you think that governments would be scared if zero people voted for either party or they forge results to save face? For one, a lot of people still buy into electoral politics. I'm assuming you're talking about the US elections. Um, Doing a little bit of a US defaultism. Um, but well, for one, there are a lot of people in the US who buy into the elections and that whole process. I don't think there'll ever be a case where zero people vote. I mean, for one, politicians, I'm pretty sure, vote for themselves. Um, so I can't really speculate on a situation like that. Would the government be scared? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't really personalize the government. It is really a structure, is a system that is operating according to its structural logics, you know? All hierarchies seek to perpetuate themselves, seek to maintain and increase their power over the people subject to them. And that's also why I think Kropotkin said that if he was put, even if he was at the head of a state, he would become just as dictatorial as any other because of the position that 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 position because of how that position shapes the person within them. So it's I wouldn't subjectify it and say that oh the government feels or the government thinks or whatever because regardless of the people in those positions, there are certain motivations that will perpetuate themselves. Um, I'm sure I could have explained that better, but I'm starting to crash a little bit. Yeah, I don't think the popularity of Maoism or Marxism Leninism is any argument in favor of Maoism or Marxism Leninism. I mean, just speaking from, well, for one, a lot of countries chose that path because that was seen in the geopolitics at the time, that was seen as one of the routes of nationalist struggle for national independence. So some countries took that route. And then for two, also, again, like I said, the popularity of something doesn't mean anything. In a lot of countries as well, patriarchy is very popular. A lot of people place a lot of stock in patriarchy. A lot of people place a lot of value in social democracy and all these different things. That's something that really influences me in any way. And especially when we're talking about sort of left currents. For one, y'all should know how I feel about the left. I made a video on leftist unity, but also I just as an anarchist, it's kind of expected that people, while they may reject certain forms of hierarchy, very rarely do people actually reject the whole thing. Do they even know that they can question and reject the whole thing? And so I think it's part of it is an issue of exposure as well. It's also an issue of, in a lot of these countries where Marxism, Leninism, and Maoism ended up taking charge, the anarchists that were involved in those movements were erased and suppressed. Very few people know about the very vibrant Cuban anarchist movement, for example. Um, Anarchists were found in all the same places, it's just that very often they were suppressed, their histories were erased, and they have been removed from the collective memory because how dare there be any alternative, right? Let me keep going. Let me keep going. Dog in Chile saw the violence police committed on protesters and attacked the riot police. That's fire. Yeah, quote, I think this comment saying, I think that these countries in the global south are less anarchist people. Anarchists are more likely to be killed because they would probably challenge peers directly and aren't valued as much. Um, yeah, I mean, at the same time though, I really, like, again, I don't like the generalization of global south. I really find it vague to the point of uselessness. I mean, I guess in specific contexts it can be used, But I mean, by what basis are we grouping some of these countries together? By what basis is Singapore and Malaysia and, well, that's pretty close together, but like Singapore and Palau and Trinidad and Suriname and Chile, these are very different contexts, very different histories and stuff, very different forces would have gone into shaping these histories. So I don't think it's a good idea to analyze, why hasn't anarchism picked up in the global south as a whole, because that's just too broad to be useful. We should look at anarchists do pose a unique challenge. I mean, anarchists pose a challenge to everybody, and that's part of the issue, right? Did I drop off? No, I dropped off for a second there. Okay, I think I'm back. OBS saying I'm back. All right. Yeah. Anarchists are a challenge to everybody because we dare to go further, I think. And yeah, that's why we abolish social relations, not people. Real. Very real. Fireball said, as a member of the Global South, I agree with Andrewism. Thank you, Fireball. They didn't just take the route because, I mean, yes, the USSR was a significant funder of national liberation movements. That can't be denied, and that really did influence why certain countries went that route for sure. Nick, yeah, I don't consider myself a leftist either. Michelita, suggestion, the book, The Great Taken. I will check it out. Let me add it to my list real quick. Um, would you agree with a different global division according as colonized versus colonizing nations? That feels more real to me, possibly, though still extremely simplistic. Yeah, it's a bit simplistic because, you know, there are countries that were colonized that would go on to engage in colonialism. In certain circumstances, it can be useful, but again, to what extent, what are we using these terms for, and to what extent can these terms actually be used in a constructive way? What about the terms imperial core and imperial periphery? Again, those also work in some contexts, but it feels just from the perspective of somebody not in the global north, not in the imperial periphery, and not in an imperial core, whatever. It just feels very essentializing because, as it stands right now, particularly when these conversations take place among people in the global north, there's a lot of essentializing, a lot of ignorance, a lot of simplifying of the peoples and histories of these places. A lot of arrogance, but then that arrogance tends to come more from the ML camp, and I mean that's a whole thing I could get into on its own. Why don't I consider myself a leftist? You could watch my video on leftist unity for my thoughts on that. But in essence, because I don't believe that term carries much descriptive has much descriptive power. Um, when you look back at it, the origins of the term, it was not. It was something that was related to covenants from the beginning. And I guess I've always been opposed to that. And then looking at how the term has evolved and what is now considered under the left umbrella, I don't really have. I mean, I have things in common with quote unquote leftists, but I don't agree with the idea that there is this unified concept of the left that is so often discussed that can be brought together in any effective or meaningful way. But a more fleshed out thoughts, I did a video on it already. And yes, anarchists are found everywhere. You're right, Freddie. And it does face different challenges in different cultural contexts. Um, yeah, I mean, if you look at, for example, how anarchism developed in Korea versus how it developed in Cuba versus how it developed in Spain versus how it developed in Russia. A lot of different circumstances versus how it developed in the US. USA, USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand were colonized, but you wouldn't put them in a group with the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Nepal, would you? Exactly. I mean, of course, those are a different category. Those were settler colonies versus the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Democratic Republic of the Congo being an exploitation colony, and Nepal. I can't remember what Nepal's specific situation was. I believe they were under the British East India Company, but or had to answer to them. But I think they had a degree of autonomy compared to other parts of the subcontinent, but I don't know for sure. I know Bhutan was fairly autonomous, did not have much direct engagement with the British. But yeah, I mean, my ignorance of that history aside, that those situations alone just prove how distinct these concepts are. And I mean, I could go on a rant about like U.S. defaultism and like America centrism and how that really impoverishes the discourse, and that's a talk for another time. But if you consider yourself leftist, even though I don't use that term, or anarchist or progressive, whatever, um, like I would challenge you to, I think, be more critical in your engagement with things outside of your country. Um, Take a look at multiple angles and be less essentializing, I suppose. There will always be multiple perspectives to be found. Don't just take one perspective on an issue from a country and run with it. Try and get multiple angles in the equation. And better yet, I would say, like, amplify people speaking for themselves rather than speaking for other people. Yeah, interrogating the need for this sort of vague dichotomy is the more pressing need for sure. Yeah. I definitely find Maoist and MLs tending to try to generalize and not see nuance. Yeah, have I read Hegemony and Social Strategy? No, I have not. Um, yeah, Reese Wilson. I mean, Degrowth came from Decroissant, or Decroissance. I don't know how to pronounce the French. And it's the institute that I work with briefly, the Post Growth Institute. They prefer the term post growth, but regardless of the term that we are using, yeah, I mean, I've unlike with terms like anarchism, where I think it's very important to describe exactly what you are. With terms like degrowth, I think while it can jolt some people to like question the growth imperative, um, it can also mislead people. Even people who are well intentioned or generally trying to understand, it can mislead some people. Um, and I think post growth has some descriptive merit. Right. Decroissance. Okay. Okay. So I'm losing a bit of steam. We did what? We did like nearly 2 hours. Oh, I need to cover everything that was on the thumbnail at least. What else was on the thumbnail? I had Curious George. I remember I had Curious George in the thumbnail. To explain that real quick, the reason so I covered on the thumbnail, I covered um Degrowth. I spoke about the books I was reading, Secret Economics and Anarchographic Guide. I spoke about and honored Aaron Bushnell and the situation in Palestine. But I didn't talk about the map and I didn't talk about Curious George. So just two quick thoughts on both of those and the reasons I put them there. My thoughts on Curious George that I just had to sprinkle in was I think that Curious George is an anarchist. Um, I don't think that shouldn't be a controversial statement to make, and I'm not the first to recognize his anarchism. I mean, there's even a group called the Curious George Brigade. It's an anarchist collective associated with the crime thing. Um, I just think he's an anarchist. That's the thoughts I had in the matter. um, Stay curious, you know. I mean, if you think about it, he learns horizontally, he moves freely, he recognizes the expertise, and he trusts in the man with the yellow hat, but he has no conception of authority. He recognizes the expertise of Professor Wiseman, but he's not subject to Professor Wiseman or Chef, what's the name, Chef Pescetti or something like that, or anybody. You know, he is, whether he's in the countryside or in the city, he is curious, he's learning, he is self-directed. He has the ideal anarchist childhood. I'm pretty sure, like, he chose to go with the man with the yellow hat to the city in the first place. Like, the man with the yellow hat didn't capture him and force him to move to the city. I mean, I'm speaking of the show's canon. I haven't read all the books. I haven't read all that lore, but at least in the show, you know, and in the movies, he chose to live that life. He sees, I think, Professor the man with the yellow hat as a friend, as a companion, as a teacher, but and he understands that he doesn't know everything, but he still experiments. He still tries. Uh, I just think Curious George is cool. I thought about him recently, and those are my thoughts on Curious George. He passes the vibe check. Do I play music or sing at all? No, I don't. Uh, yeah, and the other thing was the map. Right. Okay, this is actually a pretty big topic, but I have the energy fit. Listen, linguistic prescriptivism. Yay or nay? Because my thoughts are nay, but I want to hear your thoughts. Linguistic prescriptivism. Yay or nay? Nay. Nay. Yeah. What kind of music do I enjoy? I mean, all sorts. I spoke about it in the past stream, but I mean, all sorts from jazz to soca to calypso to hip hop to pop to synth, um, R&B. Like, the list goes on. Um, oh no, a Wikipedia page. Nobody tell H bomb guy. That's funny. Andrew's voice put my baby to sleep. Thank you. Oh, I'm so glad. Nay, 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 nay. Biggest nay. It's killing my regional dialect. Yeah. If you'll notice, I kind of like dance back and forth on the dialectic on the dialect continuum, from the acrolect to the basilect, as they say. For those who don't know, the dialect continuum is this. Um, this sort of relationship between standard and non-standard versions of the language. Hold on, let me find it. One in the context of no, right, the post-Creole continuum, I think is the better term. Right, so you have acrolect, basilect, and mesolect. Acrolect, the quote-unquote prestigious variety, basilect, the least prestigious. I don't really approach the basilect or Trinidadian Creole often because I didn't grow up speaking it. Um, but yeah, it's something that I'm constantly navigating, something I'm constantly conscious of, something I'm constantly code switching. Um, yeah, I just free yourself from the grammar police. I had to unlearn certain things about, my own perspective on Trinidadian Creole and how I navigate it. But it really sucks, you know. That sort of prescriptivism really, really sucks. For example, this concept of double negatives. It's something that I used to be thing about because I learned it in my first aid in English. I don't know if you all learned your language arts from this book, but or if it's a Trinidadian thing or what. But first aid in English. This this book. Who learned from this book? Raise your hand. I don't know if it's gonna be well known or not, but we learned. I mean, some of us learned about you use this book in Trinidad. Right, Five Walls familiar with it. I mean, Five Walls from Trinidad. The French are so led by the idea of of the language as superior. Yeah, yeah. The French are notorious for their prescriptivism. Um, I strongly dislike the term proper English. Okay, we're back. Yeah, that book is Satan. Yeah, but I remember. Oh, you'll use it in Jamaica as well. Nice. We had the Ladybird book. Yeah, I mean, I learned from the Ladybird book as well. Um, yeah. So I'm very much against linguistic prescriptivism. Very much so. Whether it comes to double negatives, whether it comes, oh, quick way to shut up the people who are very against axe instead of ask as the pronunciation. Axe is not the pronunciation that I use, but I know some people do. And I mean, I know people like to bring up the fact that that was actually the pronunciation that was used before the standard pronunciation, or the quote unquote standard pronunciation came into being. Let me see if I could find. There's no Wikipedia article on it, but there should be a Wiktionary article on it. Right? But some people pronounce it ask, some people pronounce it ask. It should not be in any way condemned, right? It was standard until 1600, now dialectic, now dialectal and no longer standard. But you shouldn't even need to reference the fact that it was used in Old English, in older forms of English. We could just talk about the fact that we don't pronounce Wednesday the way it's spelled. And people say, oh, well, the D is silent. No, the D is there. It's Wednesday. D. Wednesday. Wednesday. Nobody says Wednesday unless you're trying to spell it in your head to make sure you're spelling it right, you know? And this is a concept that has been well established in linguistics, metathesis or metathesis. I actually don't know how it's pronounced. The transposition of sounds or syllables in a word or words in a sentence. Anemone, cavalry, cavalry. It's common in multiple languages. Introduce, asterisk, comfortable, so on and so on and so on. But for some reason, people get really fixated on acts. That bothers me. Another linguistic concept I wanted to bring up real quick. This, by the way, all these linguistic stuff that I wanted to share was why the language map was on the thumbnail. Are you all familiar with USSI? Here we have a donut-ussie, a pizza-ussie, a thatch-ussie, a clussie, a grussie, a barista-ussie, and so on and so forth. You could also look at the proliferation of the suffix core. It came from hard to the core, as in hardcore, and now it's used for all sorts of things. Gloomcore, metalcore, rapcore, speedcore. We talk about cottagecore, normcore, nerdcore. It's kind of like the suffix punk as well and how it's evolved with time. And it's also like the suffix gate. I mean, originally it was just used for Watergate, and now it's taken on a life of its own. And now we speak of every controversy and every drama and every scandal as a gate. So it's pretty cool. What else did I want to share? The last thing I wanted to share. No, I can't find it. Yeah, but another issue I have with prescriptivism comes with this whole conversation, right? So I have a question for the non-Americans in the audience. When you hear American, what do you think? I love this theory. Yeah, but when you hear American, what do you think? Someone from the USA, cars, eagle screech, the continent, neoliberal capitalism. Yeah, see, Tabstig knows what I'm talking about. But I think Tabstig and I are about to disagree. Quote, I never really thought much of it until recent years, getting culture shocked that Estadounidenses call themselves Americans, like it's not a whole continent. But Awi says, depends on the context. Conspiracy Equals says, I think Fourth Reich. Somebody probably thinks they're the only country in the world. Oh God, I'm not talking about the stereotypes. An overpowered mess, cringe, slavery, Hamburg, United States derogatory. Nah, of the USA or of the Americas, depends on who you're talking about. Yeah. And apparently, I've received word from the Latin American contingent that when they hear American, they think the entire continent of the Americas. And this is an issue of prescriptivism that I'm having. The Americas is a landmass, and it's sometimes considered a continent. In English, we call it the Americas. Sometimes we call it America. Most times we call it the Americas. In some parts of the world, North America and South America, separate continents. Sometimes they're one continent. As you can see, there's this animated map that shows that different parts of the world use different subdivisions for continents. Right? And as there's Eurasia, sometimes there's Afro-Eurasia, sometimes there's America, you know? Continents aren't really like a clearly defined thing. But in English, I think most English-speaking countries, America refers to the United States of America. And when you want to talk about the continent, you either say North America or you say the Americas. And so I respect that in Spanish and in the Spanish-speaking countries that y'all use estadounidenses to refer to Americans and call yourselves and call the region America, Americano, whatever the case may be. That's cool. But I see a lot of discourse happening where people are saying that everybody in the Americas should be able to be called American. Sure, in Spanish, but you cannot you cannot go to Trinidad and call a Trinidadian an American. You cannot go to Jamaica and call a Jamaican an American. It might be technically true because they're in the Americas, but it's not a term we use. Yes, Standard English is BS. Geographically, there would be two continents, right? Yeah, well, geographically, continent is not really like a very precise term. It's yeah, continents are generally identified by convention. So in some parts of the world, the convention is only 4 continents. In other parts of the world, it's 5. In other parts, it's 6. In other parts, it's 7. So really, I mean, convention is kind of shaky. So there is no precision there, unfortunately. Yeah, fireball. If anyone calls me an American, I'll consider it. They call me a slave. Um, and I'm not coming at the Latin Americans either. I'm fully on board with y'all having a specific term for US Americans. But, I see some chats happening on the internet, and, it's like, no, you can't be prescriptivist towards another language. Like, it's not going to catch on, you know? You dig? Um, Finally, I must say, there is only one case of linguistic prescriptivism that I abide by. And that's the case of the term Caribbeans. The region is called the Caribbean. The people are called the Caribbean people. I will never use, and you will never hear me call myself a Caribbean. I am a Caribbean person. I am a Trinidadian. If you want to get specific, I'm, in terms of like ethnic background, I am Afro-Trinidadian or whatever. Trinidadian is my nationality. But as a true internationalist, I'm a person of this world. But I am a that's the thing, right, Fireball? I don't use the term West Indian. I personally don't really like how it sounds. But some people do. Some people say I'm a West Indian, right? And yeah, I know the Wi-Fi is starting to shake up a little bit, so I'm actually gonna end the stream just now. I know I keep cutting out. But yes. Oh, also, this is a thing within the community as well. Some people use the pronunciation Caribbean, some people use the pronunciation Caribbean. I grew up using the pronunciation Caribbean, unfortunately, apparently. But that's the pronunciation that I'm used to, that I've seen people using um, around me. Some people around me say Caribbean, but it never really registered in my head that that was a distinction people were making. But whether you use Caribbean or West Indian, I am a Caribbean person or I am a Trinidadian. I am not, we are not Caribbeans. We are Caribbean people. That's it. That's what I have to say. That's my prescriptivism. Oh yeah, I mean, I guess in a sense, things like the prohibition on the N word, how and prohibition on like on the use of inclusive language can be, and the encouragement of inclusive language can be seen as a form of prescriptivism. I agree. I mean, language is not devoid of politics. Anyway, um, I can't tell how you're pronouncing it in the chat without, but yeah, that's it, people. That's basically what I wanted to cover. I spoke about what I mean, first we honored Aaron Bushnell. We spoke about what I've been reading. We spoke linguistics. We spoke um, last stream. I wanted to talk about the plan that I came up for Trinidad and Tobago back when I was 10 years old and wanted to be prime minister, but we ran out of time. And again today we ran out of time. But in a future stream we'll talk about that plan. We spoke about Curious George. We spoke about the real world. We spoke about degrowth. We spoke about a couple different things. I feel like this was a cool stream. Please remember to visit the link in the description. Um, please support, the Palestine Children's Relief Fund. There is no stream schedule. I mean, not stream every month. When I catch up apps to stream is when I'll stream, but it should be maybe once a month because I'll be collecting thoughts and things that I want to share, and I wanted to accumulate too much. Um, yeah, all power to all the people. This VOD can be found in the live stream playlist, and that's about it. Peace. Oh yeah, something I didn't talk about was anyway. No. I'll save it for another time. I had a whole ramble in my chest about some of the responses I got to the cult video, but I'll save that for another time. My voice is going and it's been 2 hours and all that. Like the stream, donate to Free Palestine. Peace.